So what is the Trudeau government agenda? Let's talk about that for a minute. Before we get to the heart of the matter, let's just review a few pieces of government legislation. There are three. We already spoke of one of them, the Multicultural Act of Canada. Another would be the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act of 2002. And perhaps the most profound, Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which was integrated into the Constitution of Canada in 1982. In fact, Pierre Trudeau, he didn't like the sound of the term the British North America Act, which was the original Constitution Act of 1867 at the time of Confederation, when obviously Canada was founded. He changed that. He got rid of the British North America Act and he changed it to the Constitution Act of 1982. He also indulged in a great deal of patriation in terms of separating Canada from the UK, from the Crown, from Britain. These were some of the part of the agenda that he worked on. So in light of these three pieces of legislation, what this really means for present-day Canada and the future of Canada is that English Canada and the Anglo-Canadian community are in a decline. I mean, it is going to be transition. We are going to transition away from English Canada. The Trudeau dynasty, which I sometimes refer to it, Pierre, Justin, and even brother Alexandre, also known as Sasha, they're not fans of English Canada. In fact, they're bigger fans of communist China than they are of English Canada. They're bigger fans, supporters of communism, than they are of democracy. Okay? Fidel Castro of Cuba was a pallbearer at Pierre Trudeau's funeral. I mean, that's how close they were. And both Justin and Pierre spoke over and over again about their admiration of communism, Chairman Mao, and the nation of China. Okay? So here we have a setup whereby Justin can fulfill what Pierre began. Okay? This is done through a few methods. One, of course, is mass immigration. Okay? The Trudeau government, the Liberal government, have raised the immigration levels to the highest point in our history, 305,000 people per year. And that's without temporary workers, foreign students, and the provincial programs that also allow hundreds of thousands of immigrants into Canada. So when we say 305, all told, including landed immigrants and those who will transition to landed immigrant status, we're probably talking 400 to 500,000 people a year. 90% of those come from the third world. Now, interestingly, taking a step back for a second, in 1967, another Liberal Prime Minister by the name of Lester B. Pearson introduced the point system to the immigration program, okay? And this interestingly coincides with, if any of you recall, Montreal Expo 67. And it's interesting how so many political developments that the Canadian public aren't aware of occur at these points of expos, and the same thing was with BC in Expo 86, which basically was a bit of a dog and pony show for Hong Kong and immigration from Asia. This immigration shifted from over 90% European immigrants to 90% third world immigrants, as we have today. So we can see how this will profoundly affect a nation of 35 million, and if we remove Quebec, whatever that percentage is, 30 million, I mean, and so we're bringing in 500,000 people from the third world every year, okay? That's been going on for several decades, and under the Trudeau government, it will never decrease. It will only increase. He's got Immigration Minister John McCallum. He's some kind of puppet. If Justin says, pulls the strings, McCallum walks the walk. And in fact, those are the only politicians that make it under the Trudeau government, because if you do not toe the globalist and multiculturalist line, you're out. So immigration is effectively going to take care of the demographic component of the transition or the erosion of English Canada. Multicultural policy will take care of it on an ideological basis. You can't fight it. Anyone who dares to step out and publicly state that they don't agree with multiculturalism, as I have, is going to receive the torrent of accusations of racism, bigotry, and xenophobia. In fact, that's what conservative contender Kelly Leach is experiencing right now at this moment with her I don't know, malevolent concept of having immigration screening, right? To vet immigrants for potential terrorism and these kind of activities. A perfectly sensible and logical thing to do. So therefore, you know that Justin Trudeau will not do it, okay? And it's interesting the way these people work, these, what is sometimes referred to as multicult Canada, okay? You say immigration and they say Islam, okay? Because these people own the terminology. They own all these terms, okay? When these multicult forces talk about racism, do they ever reference the true definition of racism according to Canada's criminal code? Never. And why don't they do that? Because it doesn't fit their agenda. It's interesting, they've been running around for 30 years calling everyone who defies or disagrees with their multicultural, politically correct ideology, they're all racists. And yet in those 30-odd years, 40 years, you know, they have never once referenced the actual true definition of what racism is, okay? So we see how this multicultural lobby, okay, these diversity bandits, right, have hijacked the policy of multiculturalism. What is today multiculturalism is not what multiculturalism was in 1988 when it was legislated. In fact, Pierre Trudeau, upon a visit back to Parliament after he was no longer Prime Minister, and in the earlier mid-90s, Parliament invited him back to as a guest. And they asked him specifically what he thought about multicultural policy, whether it had been a success, and he said, "It has not worked out the way I planned it." So even Pierre, the ideological founder of multiculturalism, and this is not even limited to Canada. One could argue that he's actually the global founder of the movement. And even he said that the policy wasn't working. But you know what? Our diversity gang, they don't care. They don't care about anything in that. They care about one thing, pushing their agenda through, okay, diluting English Canada in particular, okay? Not to mention diluting the Christian faith in Canada, of which 75% approximately of Canadians are of Christian descent, either secular or religious. And so this is also an important element that's getting diluted, because as we know, I mean, as is proven and factual, Justin Trudeau is dedicated toward integrating Islam into Canadian society. I don't know how anyone could refute that. $1 billion provided to bring in refugees, Muslim refugees from the Middle East. Here's a part you may not know. He left hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of Christian refugees to die at the hand of ISIS. They're being mass murdered as we speak in the Middle East, in Syria. And the US government even the government of Barack Obama declared that this was an act of genocide, but not Justin. Why? Because he will not defy the UN. He will not defy his puppet masters. He will not defy the Nation of Islam. Justin Trudeau does not work for Canadians. He works for everyone but Canadians. Okay? So now we discussed immigration, we discussed multiculturalism. And now we'll add a third component, political correctness. Who can defy this behemoth of a belief system? If you do, like Kelly Leach so boldly did recently regarding this vetting process for all immigrants, you will be chastised, attacked, and labeled with all those nasty terms. It's just the way it is in our society. And why is this? The answer is simple. Canada has been under a 40-year program of politically correct propaganda. It's as simple as that. And it's perpetuated in the media, of course. Although we are starting to see signs of that breaking down, which is a very good thing. And in fact, and one important component of what the mainstream Canadian media keep out of our news is the incredible rise of anti-immigration parties in Europe and their growing success. UKIP in England, National Front in France, Alternative for Germany, Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party in Australia. All these political parties and organizations are on the rise, but you would never know it by the Canadian media, okay? Look, Angela Merkel this week lost in her primaries election, okay? She came in third. Do we see that on the cover of the Globe and Mail? Of course not. Why? Because it lends credence to the idea that the right-leaning parties, and this is a word we want to be careful with, right, but just for our purposes, are on the rise and making incredible strides. But multicultural Canada and its purveyors of this belief system, they refuse to inform Canadians of what's really happening because it'll fuel the social conservative movement in Canada. So here we see some of the examples of how our media are complicit in this globalist agenda of Justin Trudeau, and he's out there prancing around the world with, and every photo opportunity, and they're going crazy over him in China, and the school girls are all getting excited because of Justin's good looks, okay? But that's outside of Canada. Within Canada, the social conservative movement, of which Cultural Action Party is a major supporter and driver, is on the rise, okay? Now, political correctness thus far has been successful in shutting this down, but it's not going to last. It is not going to last, and we know this, okay, by what's going on in Europe. It's not a bunch of conjecture, okay? It is fact.